If I raise the tax rate to 90%, people will do everything they possibly can to avoid paying it, even to the extent of going hungry. They won't plant stuff. 90% might be just too high. In fact, you told me that we've already tried putting the tax rate up and we got less money. So we're basically taxing people as hard as we can. Okay, so we're not going to do tax. And maybe it's completely silly, but I just wanted to try it out on the rest of you. Here's a map of my lovely kingdom. And, you know, what you pointed out was, you know, here's the river, and here's the valley. And in the valley, we're growing wheat. And over here is our hilly range. And there they're growing apples. And the guys who are growing apples want wheat, and the guys who are growing wheat want apples. They actually each like to eat both. And I said to you, well, why don't they just trade? And you said, well, there's a problem because the wheat, that comes up in about July, and these apples aren't ready till October. And basically, the guys who grow the apples don't trust the guys who grow wheat. After all, it's very different families. Last year, there was that family, the wheat growers, who actually tried to do a deal with the apple growers, and they gave quite a lot of their wheat. And then the apple growers ate all that food, but then when the apple harvest came, instead of giving the apples in exchange for the wheat, the apple growers decided to throw a cider party and have a ball. That bit of dishonour has sort of wrecked the trade between the apple growers and the wheat growers. And your idea was, why don't I try and, what did you call it? Law? Try and enforce a contract. Sounded fancy to me. But the idea was that when the wheat growers and the apple growers got together and did a deal, they'd come to me and I'd put a stamp on it. And if it had got my stamp on it, then if the apple grower didn't give the apples to the wheat growers, I'd go and beat the apple grower up. I thought that was really fun, that bit, because I'd enjoy that. And the key point you said was that when I put my stamp on something, I can charge them. And they'll pay because they'll be benefiting from trade that they otherwise can't do. Basically, I'm going to build this system of enforcing contracts. But we need some guys who are actually got to know what the deal is and whether they've honoured it or not. So we'll need a new group of people. I'm going to call them judges, and they're going to work in a court. And that'll expand trade, and that expansion in trade will capture the benefits in tax. So that's what I'm going to try. And hopefully that'll bring in enough money to beat this guy who thinks he's a king. All we've got is we started from violence being a rational activity alongside production, and we've got scale economies in violence. And that combination, both inherently very plausible, reasonable descriptions of the world, have led us from anarchy through to this emerging centralized order, centralized state. And the centralized state has started to acquire some attributes of what we might think of as a modern state. First it got a tax system, and then once it had got a tax system, that gave me, the brutal leader, an interest in growing the economy. I wasn't growing the economy for my people, to benefit them. I was growing the economy to benefit me because I captured the revenue. And why was I doing it? Not because I'm infinitely greedy, though perhaps I am, but because I'm scared. And I'm scared of the guy over the hill who's doing the same thing. And that scale economies in violence is constantly driving us to either win or be defeated. So we're now going to play the next stage. So far we've got a tax system, and the tax system led to something that's like the rudimentary rule of law, contract enforcement. And now we're going to imagine the same thing in the next generation. Again, the guy over the hill who's done the same thing. Again, the council of advisors, and we need to think, what next? If we can't come up with an idea, what next? What else do we do apart from a tax system and contract enforcement? The guy across the hill will think of it with his advisors, and he'll swallow us. So this is nature red in tooth and claw. It's come up with a good idea or be swallowed. So what's the next good idea? Well, we need more trade. We're taxing trade. We're enforcing the contracts. How can we get more trade? Why isn't there more trade, say, between the apple growers and the wheat growers? That's the problem now that my council has got to think of. It's also the problem that you've now got to think of.